Airport stages. Within the scenario given, Boss entered the prevention preparedness stage when he went outside to determine what the cause of the loud boom was. One enters the prevention preparedness stage when they are planning how to respond. So when he planned how to respond to the incident by determining first what the cause was, he then grabbed his tactical bag and looked towards the scene with his binoculars. He then made the call to the SWAT team Lieutenant Gavin and determined where to meet, to suit boot, and determine where they must start. Boss entered the crisis stage of the response stage when he got the call from Gavin that a bomb had exploded in the Fly High Airport terminal and the communications were dead. They decided then to meet at the insertion rally point so that they could suit and boot. Within this phase of the response stage, it's normally about 0 to 60 minutes until they get to the next stage. They like to make sure that the scene is stabilized and that all resource requirements are fulfilled and used. They hit the second stage, the second scene stage, when they heard another loud boom while they were dealing with the first scene. They then hit the next crisis response stage. From the crisis stage comes the scene management of the response stage. This phase, according to Vincent, John, and Tom, the outcome of the response stage is a unified command structure is established and an organized decision-making team with ICS is established. Within the first scene, as soon as the team enters the Fly High terminal is when the scene management phase starts. From there, they are managing the scene, they are trying to stabilize the scene. But while they're at that first scene, then they had the second scene also to combat, and that happened right once the team arrived at the second scene. I feel that the executive management phase of the response stage was needed within this situation. Within the book, it stated a fully expanded incident command system brings about an organized team approach for the safe and successful resolution of the event. Within this stage, Hazmat Operations Commander understands the scope of the scene and extends the contaminated area by 300 feet. Within the executive management phase, the command system brings about an organized team approach for the safe and successful resolution of the event. Within this case and within this incident, they had to expand the scope of the scene by 300 feet because there was more contaminated than what they originally thought. Once done with the executive management phase, we can move on to the recovery and mitigation phase. Now, this happened once the incident was resolved after the 12 hours. Everybody's tired. Boss decided to begin demobilizing the resources and the assessment procedures. He was then working with other departments to review his response and check the timeline to make sure that all the necessary information was there. This process can take days, weeks, months, even years to come to a closing end. From what I understand, in leaving the different stages and the phases, you can leave the prevention and preparedness stage once the pre-planning activities are completed. You then enter the crisis phase, which is stabilizing the scene. This can take anywhere from the 0 to 60-minute marker. You then enter the scene management phase, which is complete once the scene is ready to go to recovery and mitigation. And in some cases, the executive management phase is also needed, but if it's not, in the event that it is, the phase ends once the scene is ready to go to recovery and mitigation. Once we hit the recovery and mitigation, and that's complete, the incident is restored and resolved. But again, this can take days, weeks, or even more. First outcomes met. I feel that Boss met the scene management phase. He brought in the specialist to assess the situation. All communications were assessed that were needed, and all resources were determined and utilized to conduct the scene management phase. Second outcome met was the executive management phase. The command post was structured. Both scenes were in the process of being restored. However, on the second scene, or the first scene, when they were starting to get stability with the first scene, the second scene came about. The resources that were required were used within the scenes also. Lastly, the last outcome met that I feel Boss did well was the recovery and mitigation phase. He planned for returning to normal. He also used the resources and then demobilized them. The response was being reviewed by him to make sure he had all necessary information and to make sure that if there were any questions, they could be answered. One thing that I would say Boss failed at was the prevention preparedness stage. He assumed that Gavin knew the information, so there was no intelligence sharing but by Gavin. In sharing the intelligence from Gavin and determining what risk was there, Boss cut Gavin off. In this case, I would say Boss needed to wait until Gavin was done to ask any questions that could be answered on his part to figure out what risk was there. The next stage that I feel that he failed at was the crisis stage. He didn't complete the 7 critical tasks. He ended up missing the control and communications by not stating who he was to Gavin in the first call to Gavin, and he didn't establish that inner perimeter.